3, 2,
2,
1.
1. Episode 1, Series 1,
Woo!
Season 1, whatever it's going to end up being. All the ones.
All the ones. That's an angel number, 111.
111.
I don't know what it means, but you know how each angel number has
yeah.
a meaning.
Yeah. It's a good sign for something. Also, I took a nap today and I didn't set an alarm and I woke up and I looked at my phone and it was 11:11.
Was it?
And I literally smiled and was like, okay, here we go. We're doing this thing.
I was walking by a house with a friend yesterday and it was 11:11 and we're like, oh, make a wish. And I was like, should we just start doing laps of this exact house and just
keep doing 11:11.
Run them back.
Manifest all the good things.
Yeah.
All
right.
This is our Sticky Notes podcast in alignment with our other business that we're doing.
Businesses
that we're doing. Should we just introduce ourselves first?
Yeah.
That can be our thing.
Go ahead.
I'm Rose.
Side note, do we think our voices sound really similar?
I think they do sound a bit similar,
when
right?
we heard that, I was like, I wonder if people might struggle to know who's speaking.
They might, because, but at least it's only 2 of us.
Yeah, because the problem is, the whole thing where it's I think I mimic people also subconscious. That's the whole like third culture thing or like weird accent thing where I believe I mimic. So I might just start sounding like.
Well, the video will help too. Then that's a good reason to watch. If you're listening, maybe you should watch if you can't tell who we are.
Yeah.
I also didn't know. I go by Rose and Rosie.
Yeah.
In my life, it's like 50-50.
Okay.
But I feel like I actually prefer Rosie.
Really?
But you don't know me as Rosie,
no. You know
so
what
that probably feels weird.
Because I remember hearing Tristan refer to you as Rosie, and I was like, oh, I don't know if that is just like nickname for you in terms of like endearment, like he is your husband, he calls you Rosie.
I mean, my legal name is Rose.
I imagine.
But people call me Rosie. So I
call you Rosie.
I had Rosie. For a minute either one is fine, but I kind of like having the Pilates thing being Rosie.
Yeah, we can do that.
Yeah, so I might introduce myself as that.
Yeah.
Rosie and Leila, Leila and Rosie. It's cute.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I have like a family nickname, and that no one but my family uses. But they call me Lulu, which is pearl in Arabic, or like translates to. But it's almost a thing where it's like really there are some members of my family where I've never heard them call me Leila, and I have cousins who thought my birth name was Leila or Lulu because they've never heard Leila. Yeah. And there's some where if they say Leila, I'm like, what has happened? Like, why are you calling me this? Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I have a pretty even split in my life, but I actually feel like I don't know. Some people might get upset if I say this. Probably people I know aren't watching this. Maybe I don't know, but the closest people to me call me Rosie.
Okay, cute.
So I kind of want that to be
the persona that you or not persona.
Yeah, it's like an intimate experience, you know. Anyway,
all right, that's Rosie then.
I'm Rosie and
I'm Leila.
Whoa. And we met in London, which is a third location space for both of us. Do you want to talk about where you are?
Yeah, we can.
A little brief history of Leila.
How we got to London, kind of.
How you got to London.
How I got to London.
And then I can say how I got to London, and then we'll say how we met.
Yeah. Cool. Well, Leila, as we said, I was born and raised in Jeddah in Saudi Arabia. I'm Lebanese originally, and Lebanese. I have a Lebanese nationality. I never really know how to say it, but I was born and raised there. Hence the Americanized international school accent. Which, if you've never met an international kid before, I sound American to you. But if you've met an international kid,
I thought she was American when I met her. I was like, "Whoa, where are you from?"
I was like, "Yeah, what city are you from?"
Yeah.
I've had so many American clients who are like, "So when are you coming back home?" And I was like, "I don't think we have the same."
We're not understanding. Yeah.
So once I think you meet one international kid, you start to pick it up because it sounds American at first, but then the more internationals you meet, you realize that we just sound a little bit off.
Yes.
And then
I do notice that about you now. Yeah. I'm like, she doesn't sound American.
Because I was in a British international school as well, so then there are some things and some terms that I would say and spell in the British way over the American, which people then think I'm Canadian. But
also the accent that you had, I think if an American were to place it, it would probably be maybe it's a pretty neutral one. I feel like I'm too far in it to actually know what they would think, but
I've gone into
I have a Midwestern accent, which is very
I've
neutral.
either gone to in California or the states that sort of border Canada. I can't remember which ones I've been given.
Michigan's like that, so Midwest. But yeah, California, I could totally see.
Okay, fair.
There's worse places to be.
Oh, 100%. I was really shocked though in the beginning. I was like, I feel like I don't give off California girl, but I guess they come in all girl. Yeah, I guess they come in all like shapes, sizes, and colors and all that.
Exactly.
So
yeah.
But yeah, so was born, raised in the Middle East, picked up the international school accent, came over to London 5 years ago almost now in COVID.
Was it 5 years?
Yeah. It's
scary. It was 5 years.
I know, also it's passing by so because I came in 2020.
Yeah.
During
Same.
COVID.
That is so weird. I didn't know that.
I came over for uni, graduated from UCL, with a degree in human geography, which is being put to great use as a Pilates instructor.
Was that your university degree?
Yeah,
like undergraduate, as we would call it. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, so it's a bachelor's in human geography with an original aim to go into like NGO work and politics. Because I was
super interesting.
So it was so cool. I just got burnt out. But I always everyone thinks when I did, because I say I did geography, and they always think it's the physical side. So they're always either ask about like volcanoes, continents, or they start
like topography.
Yeah, or they start quizzing me on capitals and countries and flags. And it's happened one too many times where I just don't know.
It's not quite.
I don't have that knowledge. And so
you have such important knowledge, though.
Yeah, but the ongoing joke in the friend group is I just should not be trusted with anything geographical as it pertains to maps and countries. So, but yeah, so then when I graduated, or towards the end of my degree, I was getting burnt out with the politics of human geography and just the state of the world, and I felt quite useless.
Fair enough.
I was just, and I mean, to be fair, also a lot of my professors were on strike for valid reasons, but it was very tough to be in education when they kept going on strike. And I was like, I don't think I can do a whole master's degree of this as well. And I had started up Pilates, and it was doing so much for me, just mentally more than even physically. And the way I felt or maybe the unhealthy codependency I had with my Pilates instructors, I was like, I would like to be able to give that to someone else, like that joy of like the 1 hour a week where my brain can turn off.
Yeah.
And I was attending more Pilates classes than I was lectures, and I was like, maybe this is a sign we go down the Pilates route. So yeah, I signed up for a course. I did my full comprehensive classical training with Equinox. Finished that up a year ago now. Started working at Pi, and that was where I met Rosie,
which is crazy.
Yeah.
So I didn't realize you'd come in 2020 when I also came here. Who knew we were on
say that feels I was about to say that feels serendipitous.
Yeah, is that everything you want to say?
I think so. I think that's the basis of how I got to London, at least. I mean, my mom sort of grew up coming to London quite a bit.
Yeah, I was going to ask, is there a connection? Was there a reason why you came to London?
My grandfather came for work a lot. And so then because there was also then like things politically in Lebanon. So there was a point when my mom was like in A levels where she needed to be sent abroad. She couldn't be in Saudi or in Lebanon. So they sent her to boarding school for A levels. And so she did that for her A levels and then uni. So I was kind of like, well, I want to do whatever she did. So I wanted to come here for uni. But then we had that home base here where I came in for a couple of summers, or like quite a few summers. So it was close to home in terms of like the flight time was only 7 hours also. So it wasn't like I had to go all the way to the States or like Canada.
Yeah.
And then just logistically, like it cut the expense of having to pay for rent by just like being able to stay in a family house.
Totally fair.
So like logistically it worked out.
London's not cheap.
No. But then also I had a bit of an affinity for London because I had grown up coming to it, and it did feel like home. So yeah.
Perfect.
That's how I got to London and how I got to Pi. How did you get to Pi?
I moved here also in 2020 for a master's at King's in bioethics.
Stop. They're rivals kind of.
Yeah, they are actually. And it was weird because the whole thing was basically online and there were lots of strikes going on, to your point. And so I just, weirdly similar to you, I loved what I was learning. I thought it was super interesting, and I studied philosophy in my undergrad, so it was thinking that I liked. But by the end, I just, post-dissertation, it's like I need a break from school. And then around that time, I had been doing Pilates my whole life, unbeknownst to me that it was classical. I just did it with my mom at a studio in my hometown in Michigan, which is where I'm from. I was actually born in the UK.
So yeah,
backtrack. I was born in Southampton, so that was why I came back to the UK because I have citizenship here.
Grow up only in the States?
I moved to the States when I was 6.
Okay.
So basically, yes, but my dad is from London, so I had kind of an affinity for that reason. Okay. He went to all of his schooling here, and he did medical school here, and then he moved to the States. I mean, he went to the States and basically brought my mom back here. They had all their kids here, and then they went back when I was 6. So my reasoning for coming here was basically like, I have citizenship, let me use it.
Yeah.
Thinking it would just be for 2 years. When I moved, I was trying to find a Pilates studio, and Pilates is very unregulated. So I kept going to all these places, which were just doing contemporary, like nothing wrong with it. But I was like, whoa, this isn't what I'm used to. Like, I'm not recognizing this.
At that point, were you then aware that this is a different concept to what I've been doing? Like, you were starting to able to separate classical and contemporary?
and I figured out that was why, because I did some research into it and realized, okay, I'm looking for classical Pilates. And then I asked a few people who were connected to my studio in Michigan, where I'm from, and PI came up. I started going there, as well as Exhale, which is another classical studio in London, and was a client for a long time. And then now I'm still in the midst of doing the classical full comprehensive training there, but I got very integrated with PI, not with
Shout out Holly,
where you did it. Shout out to Holly, who runs PI, how both names go.
I think I can't remember if I asked her once.
She's like, whatever,
yeah,
both. But yeah, PI, whatever. I feel like I call it PI usually, but PI is a studio in Battersea. And the first time I met Leila, so I had been a client there, and then I did my mat training first, and then Holly.
You were my body for my.
That's what I was gonna say. This is literally how we met. Is Holly kind of tapped me on the shoulder, literally, and said, like, I need some admin help. Are you interested? And I said yes, because I just wasn't sure what I was doing with my life, and I was fine with that, but like some extra money, sure. And I ended up being like very heavily involved in the behind the scenes of the studio. And so then we had a different person also doing admin at that time, who's no longer doing admin. But I remember he said to me,
like, he's like a studio manager.
Yeah, we have a new potential teacher coming in. I think you were the first person to come in who had trained at Equinox. Like, you were the start of that, like, flow.
I do think so, because I don't want to credit.
How did you reach out, like, think to teach there? Had you just heard of it?
When I was doing my teacher training, we were only doing privates, obviously, with whoever your teacher trainer was that you chose to train with. And then I was training like privately, as in just on my own personal practice. But I missed going to group classes because I had obviously only done group classes before starting off my certification. And I love the environment of a group class. I think there's pros and cons to privates and groups, but I missed just like going to a class, and I wanted to hear different teachers teach me, because I just got so used to the instructor I was always training with and her cues. Important. And she also knows how to talk to me and train me, and I obviously everyone responds differently to different cues. So I asked Laura, who is what I would consider almost like a mentor at Equinox, and then Christos, the team at Equinox in Kensington, where they would recommend for me to train, because I had only just discovered classical a couple months before that. And I was like, so where do I go to do a classical class? And then they listed PI, and Exhale. But at the time, I don't think Exhale had their Marylebone location, and Battersea was like, PI was only like about half an hour from my place. And I was like, okay, I'll just go there. They recommended Max to me. And then
Superstar, by the way.
I remember they just gave me a bunch of names, because, the class, and as we will probably go to explain, the classical world is so small, both in London and even just worldwide. Everyone is so really small, interconnected, because you sort of all train from the same people and in the same circles. So they recommended PI to me, told me that Holly had trained under Amana, and I was like, all right, I'll go do a class there. And then I just went and I did a class, and I think the first class I did one of Nasia's classes in a long months before I even went to interview for them. But so then when I was nearing the end of qualifying to sit my like final exam and was just ready to start teaching. I was like, right, I could do with some money. So I was like, let me. I wasn't even gonna email Pi because I know that Pi have their own teacher training program.
Yeah.
And I was talking to Laura, and I was like, is there even a point? I was like, why would they take me over someone just from in house?
Yeah.
And she was like, no, email. Like, you never know what's gonna happen. So I kind of credit it to her or owe it to her a little bit because she was the final push to tell me to just email. And then I just found the contact email, I think, from the website. But what happened was
conservatory email.
Yeah, well, what happened was I really lucked out because I just sent over my I gave a bit of a bio in my email and my CV. But at the time, the email, I don't want to say the actual email, obviously for privacy reasons, but
it's online.
Is not the conservatives, mine. So
the
email,
yours.
Yeah,
yes,
the email I was using in my CV. There is basically a bit of a confusion between one of the L's either being an L or a 1.
Okay.
It's a different email to the one I now use. I'll just tell you. So the old one was like, so a lot of people couldn't tell if it was LL or IL or 1 1.
Yeah.
So I had that email and it just was not, for whatever reason, on the CV, it just like wasn't showing. So the old studio manager reached out to me on WhatsApp because I had my number on my CV as well.
That's wild.
And he reached out to say, hey, listen, like, I've been trying to email you back and schedule you in, but I can't. It's like the emails are pinging back. So I really I owe it to him actually because he did that. He took that extra step and made the extra effort to email or to send me a message through WhatsApp. So I don't know how many other people would have done. Sorry,
that's very. Yeah, let's just acknowledge our mic because we only have one right now. And it's just right in the middle.
Yeah.
On our pillow.
So yeah, I owe a lot to him as well for taking that extra step. Yeah. And then he messaged to ask me to come in. And then when I came in, Rosie was my body.
The body. So he told me, we have this teacher coming in. Would you just do an hour with her to see? I think it wasn't like to judge, but it was just to make sure there wasn't anything glaringly wrong, which I think is a good idea.
Definitely.
And then I did the session with you and I loved it. I thought you were so sweet. And I remember thinking we're American and then learning that you weren't. And then you started working there and it
brought forth the wave of Equinox employees.
You did. And now there's been a steady flow because they clearly have excellent training.
Yeah.
And it's very cool.
Not that they all owe me their jobs, but Holly did tell me once, she's like, we were really happy with you and you got good feedback. So we're trusting the Equinox employees.
And she really has. She's stuck to that.
Yeah,
she's really brought a lot of them in. And we should have a whole episode about Pi because that is such a, I think, unique space to grow as a teacher. So we don't have to get into it too much now. But then what happened with this connection was there was a period of time where Holly, who runs the studio and runs the training program, was hosting like not workshops, but monthly meetups of the newish teachers
to just know where you're going, but yes, she was
that. To talk about.
We haven't had a meeting in
I know it hasn't happened in a while.
Yeah,
but there were a few.
We had like 2 or 3, and then it's very. There was one that was supposed to be scheduled, and I just think no one could show up for it. And it just no longer.
But it was a great idea because it was like people, and I was super new to teaching. I'm still very new to teaching, but it was us basically coming in and saying like, let's go over how to deal with this type of issue that someone's running up against or whatever it might be. It was kind of open floor. And I remember one time we were just going around and checking in and Leila said, I just went home.
It was around
I don't know
where
it was New Year's.
So I went back to Jeddah for the first time in about 5 years since I had graduated high school because my parents moved to Riyadh, which is in the eastern province. So I hadn't been home because I consider Jeddah, I think, home. Like Beirut is home and Lebanon is home, but I mean that's where I spent 18 years of my life. So it's like a home in a different way.
Yes,
definitely. One of the many places I'm able to call home.
Yeah.
And I remember I was doing a bit of unofficial scouting of just what's the Pilates world going on here, what exists, what are the studios like. Now that I had known about the classical, where is the classical?
I remember you said market research was the word, and I remember just clocking it because I think in this space I've kind of noticed, and there's so many ways you can group people, but I've definitely noticed even at Pi, there's people who want to come in and teach and cash that check, and that's what they want to do. And then there's people who want to like evolve it more in some way, and there's no judgment either way, but there's people who are teaching, and then there's people who want to either teach teachers, as some of the instructors in our studio are now doing. There's some people who are starting their own thing, and I just had a feeling in the back of my mind for a long time I would want to do my own thing, and then eventually I remembered it, and I was kind of starting, we'll talk about this in the full episode, but I was building my own thing. I was like, I need to do this with someone, it's so much more fun. And then remembered, and
or was it Tristan that was like,
oh yeah, Tristan was like, what about
don't you're talking to me about, that's what Tristan told me. We had a dinner that was like a group pie dinner, but it was
for
also
all the
just
teachers,
us two with Tristan, Rosie's husband.
Yes.
In the corner, and we were just having our own little bubble.
We were in our own world.
He was like, he's like, I've been hearing about this so long, like talk to someone else about it, almost in the most loving way,
because he's a vet, which is obviously so different from Pilates. And I just think it's more fun to do things. A, it's less scary, and B, it's more fun to do things with someone else.
100%.
And I was like, great, let's do it. And then I remember I sent you, I don't know if it was a voice message or a text.
Both. There was a voice message and like a nice
it was like
paragraph.
For too much, and you immediately were like, yes. So now,
because I remember I'll never forget, it was like either the Monday or the Tuesday right after I ran a high rocks. I raced in a high rocks.
Yes, she did. She crushed
Sunday.
it.
Thank you.
She's an athlete.
Mixed doubles with my cousin, so the weights were really tough.
Very cool.
But I'll never forget, because the Saturday of that weekend, the like bank holiday weekend, was International Pilates Day, and then the Sunday was the day I raced high rocks. And I remember I felt that weekend sort of just summarized everything, or like the two biggest facets or parts of my life, which was the Pilates on the Saturday, and like that class, like getting to post about how much I loved the classical world, and then getting to do the high rocks race on Sunday, which if anyone hasn't done a high rocks, it's a hybrid.
Sounds really scary.
It's a functional fitness sort of race. It's running mixed with functional fitness, like
stuff,
ergs and things like that,
pushing.
So very different to Pilates, but I love both so equally, and they've both done so much for me and for my life. And so I really felt like, wow, the weekend also was like just a mixture of everything I loved. And then you messaged me on either the Monday or the Tuesday, because it was right after that, with your idea of, I guess we haven't even said it officially, but a way to combine those two things through a new lens, like rather than just looking at what is like now I think a lot of people are doing like a Pilates sculpt, which is like bringing weights and bringing weights into Pilates,
like bar,
kind of. I think it's just like I like the classes that refer to it as a sculpt, because I think that is what they're aiming for,
and the goal is.
That's kind of how it's being marketed, but they all just call it Pilates something. Like, it's not really Pilates, which is a whole other conversation. But the frustrating thing with it being unregulated, which you were saying before, is that people don't know what they're signing up for. So it's like some classes are just selling them the wrong thing, which then means when they come to us wanting that and you don't deliver that, it's frustrating for both ends. Like, I get, if you want to do a sculpt class, that is more than fine, and both can exist, but I just wish universally we were labeling things and naming them a bit differently, so that you could get what you wanted almost and like had signed up for. But so Rosie sends me the paragraph idea, or just like you sort of spitballing.
I was still in the spitballing phase, and that's how we got to where we are now. So that's kind of our intro. Should we do just a metaphorical cut intro and then into?
I think that's a good like about us, because that's something that can be pinned like at the top of the profile.
Like, hello, this is us.
We got to it. Okay, cool.
And now, what is this podcast?
Deep dive.
What are we even doing here? What's the purpose? Sticky notes. I don't even know if we said that in the first one. I guess we did.
Welcome to. Oh my god, we should have said
sticky notes.
Should we? We don't want to. Do we want like not an intro, but like
a thing we say at the beginning?
Welcome to sticky notes.
Welcome back to sticky notes, or
welcome back.
Welcome back to.
Put a pin on it. We should probably run.
We can workshop it.
To
sticky notes. And I think it would be nice to say something
put it on a sticky note, and we'll deal with that.
Whoever you are, wherever you are, welcome.
By the time we record next week, we'll have
something dialed in. But this goes back to the purpose of this whole thing anyway, which is we are starting many businesses under this umbrella company called Honeycomb Co Collective, and Sticky Notes podcast initially will be documenting that process, because
the process of creating
the process of what it even is, what we're doing, why we're doing it, who we are,
what the businesses
are, and then it will also evolve into us, talking to other classical teachers, interviewing people, talking more about everything, but
the health and wellness industry,
health as well, all of it. And initially it's going to be what we're even doing and why we're even doing it. So I don't even know where to start with that. Should I say the background of what I was thinking first?
Talk about what you initially came up with, or not what I was came thinking, up with, but your original plan, and then we can talk about how I sort of decided, or it came in and just throw a whole
exciting, fun, wonderful, not wrench, but like kind of wrench, another layer to it. With all these other paths I've tried to take, I feel like I always have gotten to the point of like, man, I just want to be doing my own thing. Like I feel like I have some kind of creative entrepreneurial undertone that I'm now allowing to come through, but it was always kind of there.
Which I do think we can touch on it more. I do think in our duo, you do bring that entrepreneurial spirit a bit more. I think I ground us more.
You totally ground us. Leila's like, what's the to-do list? And I'm like, in 30 years, we can have this, this, and this.
But I think I needed someone to give me because when you reached out to me and roped me into your idea, I think you gave me not permission to dream of something bigger, but the hope was always something of my own. But I think you were very much, no, we can do something now.
We can do something now.
Brought it to the present day, whereas in my mind it was just like, distant. One day down the line I'll deal with it then. But so I think you're always push in a very good way. You are being like, how can we push this forward? And I'm like, okay, so what's step one?
What's step two?
Let's have a meeting.
What's the finances?
Can we meet next week and discuss things? And I do think we balance each other out well in that sense.
Definitely.
And I know, because I would have never described myself as entrepreneurial in that way. And I do think we ground each other and balance each other.
You need both.
But so definitely. You had been working.
So before I started my training to be a teacher at PI, I had started a different one in the US, and which was phenomenal. It's through this thing called the Rebel Pilates Collective, and it's very classical, great program, but I just was not based in the US. I wanted to do it because I knew the people. It was connected to my studio at home.
So you started it when you were here?
Online? And I was like, I'll just go back and forth because the modules are pretty spread out.
Okay.
Like I'll go back and forth. I'll visit my family when I'm doing it anyway. And then it just wasn't working. It wasn't feasible financially to fly back to Michigan all the time. But they had this really cool virtual online network for the apprentices. And I used it to find PI in part and other classical studios. So it was just I had it in the back of my mind, like, okay, that was really awesome that existed for that group of people. And then when I was working at PI doing admin, PI, whatever, both names work, doing admin, I would get so many emails from people who were apprentices in Australia, in Japan, in the States, or people who were in the classical space and had clearly found PI through, Googling classical studios or whatever. And I've always had this thought of how fun would it be to be able to connect them in some way. And then I started thinking like that could be bigger. I would love to have a virtual space. I love to travel. Like I want to have that freedom. And I just thought starting off as a virtual Pilates space would be cool. It was all pretty loose. And I also thought having a physical location at some point would be really cool. I wanted to do something of my own. And then
you're like, maybe one day we could have a in person,
right? Like I just think there was I wanted to have my own Pilates thing. Honeycomb Studios was the initial idea name. It went through a few different renditions, but that's been a really like cool thing too for me, because that idea comes from when I was a kid. I would dress up like a bumblebee, and I was obsessed with like being a bee. And now my close family and some of our really close family friends will call me the bee or Bumble or something. It's been a theme in my life. And I really like the concept of a honeycomb being this strong natural structure. And then the fact that Pilates is such a strong, it's such a source of strength, but it also has kind of a softness to it and an elegance to it at times, not necessarily, but
I think also what you were saying about building a community, we haven't even discussed this personally, but you mentioned something, I don't know if it was on the podcast or when we were talking beforehand, about wanting to build a community, and all I could think of was like a hive, and like the idea, and everything keeps coming back to this like honeycomb bumblebee, and I was just thinking of like the buzz of like a hive around and the community that exists.
And you can build and build and build, like it's just a cool idea. And then I reached out to these two amazing women who are helping us, Nikki and Kate, doing like branding and website design. And they helped me design a Honeycomb Studios logo, which is kind of, I was in the final stages of that when I reached out to you. And then, well, first of all, will you talk a little bit about what you told me, the significance of like, because this was just a real, I remember telling you the name and being like, is she gonna hate this name?
There's two parts of it. So Rose turns to me, Rosie, sorry.
No, either one, either one, her. Totally fine.
You come to me and you were, as she was describing the honeycomb, what got her excited, and also I think the work you did with the branding team, because they were explaining about how subconsciously the shape of a honeycomb and our knowledge of it in nature being a structural object or having structure inspires a feeling of support and I can't remember what you were explaining exactly, but she turns to me and goes, so like the hexagonal shape of a honeycomb. And then she continued to speak, but all I heard in my head was hex. And I just, those three letters, hex, it just got in my head. And as we, I think, go on to explain the idea of where we bring hex into it, I just really liked the name, and it was very sharp and sweet. And I loved the Honeycomb Studios and where we were going with it originally. But I think very quickly in our first conversation, things were shifting away from your initial plan or just having your initial plan. And I think we both were aware that we were probably going to need some different names. So I think, so Hex came to me and I was like, dear God, I hope she loves this name.
And I loved it.
And so that worked out.
Wait, will you also talk about, though, what you had messaged me about what your mom said about the significance?
So then Hex comes from that, and then I emailed my FaceTime my parents.
I emailed my mother.
I got on a Zoom call. No, so I FaceTimed my parents, and it was a few days after our call, because I sort of had to let everything settle with me and just like not think things through, but like process of like, okay,
craziness.
No, but it wasn't even that. It was like in the best way. I was like, my life is about to change, or like not change, but I think it was, this marks a big shift in my future in my career as well.
And what you said to me, sorry to interrupt.
Say what? Because I don't know.
What she said to me, which I really loved and have been telling people about, because it's true for me too, is it is quite challenging to be in an industry or career where there isn't a ladder to follow. There's not like the promotion that everyone who's at your level will get if they do X, Y, and Z steps. So for both of us, I think having something that we want to build is so cool, because we both have wanted to
100%
build a career around this skill and world that we love and are a part of. And so you said to me, like, this is really cool because I've been trying to figure out how to career build.
It's been almost a year of teaching, and I've just started to look at the career, or just like looking forward where I want to take it, whether I want to go down the education route and looking to be a teacher trainer, or whether I want to build a studio. Because it's like, I was talking to someone and he was explaining you either go down the management route, which is kind of what we're eventually getting into in the terms of building your own studio and or managing people, or alternatively you go down the education route,
which I wasn't really ever that
no, I mean,
interested in.
never say never.
Yeah,
but
never
for
say
now,
never, but yeah.
And it's not that I was also getting burnt out with teaching, but I would love to always be teaching to an extent, whether it be privates, groups, whatever it may be. But I was just looking for a fulfillment from something else, and this has already started to give me that fulfillment. So once
fun.
I sort of,
so fun.
I'm loving it.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
once I sort of, and it gives me the same excitement that I felt in the first weeks and months of the teacher training program. Not that I'm ready to not be a Pilates instructor anymore, but I was sort of looking for something else, whether or not I continue to teach. TBD. But anyway, so then once everything settled and I was like, okay, I think it was a big shift where I was like, okay, my life is actually going to change, and hopefully where this is a success, which I'll manifest and say it will be, that is a whole future for myself that I never really imagined, because like I was saying, that was down the line. Someone else would have fun. Like that is like, oh, I'll deal with it at a later date, where it's like now coming so much earlier.
And also being relatively new teachers, that was a big hang up for me. Is I remember kind of trying to figure out like how long was Holly a teacher before she opened a studio.
Yeah.
And that's why we're doing this podcast, because we, at least I, have not been much of a witness to people who are still in the building stages.
Yeah.
And we have all the skills that we need to do something like this. And we're learning so much along the way already. So to just go into it and produce something like this, even that's super honest about where we're at, I think is great, because I didn't want to wait to do this until I have 30 years of experience and then open up a studio. And that's my whole like ethos, is that I've been doing this for 30 years and look how experienced I am. Where I'm at now is I've been teaching since last autumn, and like September, I think, or October. And I have this business idea, and that's what I want to be doing.
Yeah.
And 100%. You can build it from wherever you are. So
then once everything settled, I call my parents, and just to catch up, and then to sort of word vomit this to them, because I had talked with them briefly about the idea of like sort of moving home one day to the Middle East and like setting up a studio, or like one day wanting to have a studio, but very much all in the vagueness of one day I want to do this. Wouldn't it be cool to have a studio? Which I think most people who are in like also the fitness industry, like that's sort of a typical thing that you would think of. So then when I was explaining everything that we had discussed in our first meeting, and how much I believed in Honeycomb and in Hex and Honey Hex, and we were talking about how meaningful the honeybee is, and everything like that, my mother turns to, or she had also actually, more importantly, she had been not crocheting,
needle pointing, quilting,
because it was a quilt. She was quilting her new pattern. My mother is in her retirement age. She's not that old. I don't want her to see this and think I'm calling her old, but she's been just loving all her arts and crafts, and she's great at it. And she'd been working on I believe it's probably to represent float like a butterfly, sing like a bee. And so she was doing a butterfly and a bee. And then I was talking about, oh my god, the bee is so cool. And she's like, well, it obviously has a lot of religious significance in Islam. It just felt symbolic, because there was lots of little things where I think you might not necessarily picture our lives to have interconnected the way they are, or for there to be so much crossover, but there just seemed to be so many things that just, oh, there's another link that connects us. So then when my mom said that, I was like, how on earth do we have like another connection? Or like sidebar from editing Leila here, just to add, because we found another connection like the day after this was recorded, and I really just feel like it needs to be mentioned here. One of my mother's sort of nicknames in childhood was Zaina the bee. Zaina, my mom's name, and then the bee was because of an Arabic cartoon called Zaina wa Nahla, or Zaina Nahla, which translates to Zaina the bee, or Zaina and the bee. I'm not sure. I have not seen Zaina and the Nahla or Zaina and the bee, but I remember even just like sort of joking or teasing comments being made and referring to my mom as Zaina Nahla. So my mom the bee. Another lovely, wonderful connection to the name and the idea behind Honeycomb. It just was another thing that's so meaningful that we have two different now also connections to the name and what it means to each of us, and then together. So it was so, and my mom was quilting a bee as we were speaking. So it was just like, it felt very fated.
Yeah,
and it felt
it
like
did.
something cosmically or something was being aligned in the universe, and I felt like, okay, it feels. You ever feel like you're in the right place at the right time?
That is
That's
exactly
exactly
how
what I
it.
felt like.
Yeah,
I was like, it felt like everything was lining up
Yes,
to bring us to London from
completely.
from our different sides of the world, to bring us to London, to Pi in London as well, and then to this. So yeah, that's that's where the names all came from and came to be.
And so where we're at now, maybe we can just say this
I
part and then
we
can wrap it up. But where we're at now is we have registered this bigger company, which is called the Honeycomb Co Collective.
Whenever people ask, I never know what our actual
I forget too, because it's really just for legal purposes to have something to be registered under.
Rose is our legal department.
I'm the legal department, and you are the organization department, which probably should be a little more on me too, but I'm working on it. And then under that, and it's still also evolving, but under that we have kind of like the initial idea that I brought to Leila, which is Honeycomb Studios, which is a very kind of purely classical space, and will encompass quite a few things, but it will be geared toward the classical world and teachers and apprentices who are
hopefully a helpful
tool and community to connect kind of these floating strings that I especially keep seeing in my job at Pi, but also that you've mentioned. There's a very kind of small world that's spread out globally, and as the generations go on, classical Pilates is, getting diluted and changed, which is fine because that's how time affects things, but it would be cool to connect people. So that's the other piece. And then what Leila brought into it, which makes so much sense if you understand classical Pilates, which we will talk about at a different point, is, and then do you want to say
of course
that piece?
So the Hex vision brings it brings HIIT workouts or HIIT strength training, whatever you may look at it, to Pilates in a way we want to do differently to the idea of a sculpt class. So it is not that you are combining the moves into one, like at the same exact time. We want there to be a clear separation between the two. But I think in both of our lives, we both do a combination of Pilates and HIIT training. You will find there most of instructors that you train with have some combination of strength training alongside Pilates in their routine. Most Pilates instructors don't just do Pilates.
Right.
And historically, like you're just saying, Joseph Pilates does have a connection to also that boxing HIIT world. But so that was something that I think in the last few months where I've really introduced a lot of HIIT into my daily life. It has done sort of almost magical things for me in how my body exists. Nothing aesthetically, just the actual like functionality of how I can move. And it was a new way to look at working out, a way to combine those two things, and also a way for us to have, I think, there are unique view on Pilates and on workout classes, because I think there are a lot of great workout classes that you can take online and great instructors, and we want to approach it in a different way. And our unique USP, our unique selling point, is that we are adding a twist onto it without
changing the actual classical Pilates. Because when I again was doing classical Pilates in Michigan and didn't know that there was a class I did taught by a classical teacher who was also trained as like a spin instructor, and it was 25 minutes of spinning and 25 minutes of truly classical mat Pilates, like going through the order as it was designed. And I loved it. And I have not been able to find, if you find anything that's HIIT Pilates, it's like you just said, we don't want to do, which is really blending them. And, the goal is that if you have a class with us, with this thing we're building, it would be a class, but there is a distinct moment where you switch and do this, and change the tone of what you're doing.
You would know when you were doing Pilates and when you were doing HIIT. Like we want it to be sort of
even though it's one class.
And two sort of separate sections rather than jumping between exercises between the two. And we also hope that through that we can bring Pilates to people who may not have wanted to include it into their workout routines or into
to
their
be a little
life.
broad, like men,
yeah,
for instance,
athletes.
it can be athletes, people. It is encouraged to be complementary to so many other things, but there isn't always an easy, for me, especially if I go to do a HIIT class. Like this morning, I went and did a boot camp in the park I live near, and to then go and like ride my bike to a classical studio and do another. Like time is precious, money is precious. That's just not something I have the space for right now. So to be able to effectively get both while still getting all the benefits that you can get out of classical Pilates, I think is so important.
Like I think it's in my personal life where obviously because we are also Pilates instructors, we do it a lot more and take a lot more probably privates and sessions than anyone others may. And I on a Friday I do a private and then I do a HIIT workout right after. I do have that luxury for that. And
which is great.
No, it's 100.
That's the
and
ideal.
It's the ideal, and it genuinely I look forward to that 2-hour slot on a Friday where I see Laura for an hour. And I go to
shout out Laura.
Workout.
Shout out Laura. But shout out
big time. And even my parents know. They're like, she'll call us after the 2 hours.
Aww.
And I look forward to it so much because I feel great. I'm like almost buzzing after. And I want to be able to give that feeling to someone, and also people who maybe on the other side of things who are in the Pilates world and have an apprehension or a fear of like either the gym, strength training, HIIT, whatever it may be, because it can be a very intimidating space.
Definitely.
Especially if you haven't worked out, if you don't have what you
consider Pilates
the ideal body or the ideal. I think there's now an image that we may all like through social media has formed, or social media has formed it. We all have an image of what a Pilates person looks like, a Pilates, the Pilates princess of it all. Where I mean, Pilates was created by a man in his underwear, like.
And that's
in the World
just
War
to
I.
be clear about it, we want to be almost like the antithesis of that. Like if you are, looking a certain way, great. However, we want it to be accessible and also completely non-judgmental because there is definitely a status quo for how people in this industry look, and it's just not really acceptable in my opinion. It doesn't make sense because people have like different bodies.
That's like the 0.1% of people. And I think this is a whole other tangent we're going into. Like I don't want to go into it too much, but I mean, see, when you have people who are promoting it and they're already quite lean through how they eat or how they just genetically are, and then to say that is through Pilates body. There is no Pilates body. Everyone is a Pilates body. Anyone can do Pilates.
Anyone will benefit from Pilates.
And so hopefully by bringing those two almost opposing, which they're not, but can be seen as opposing concepts, we are going to help bridge that and give people the option to do just that, to both.
So where we're at now is the company's registered. Ooh. We have part of our branding done. We're working more on the other pieces in the website and things, but we'll have the next trademarked, all that stuff. The rest of this first series will be about, or not necessarily first series, but within this series will be about how we're building it, what's happening, like literally what does this look like from our perspective.
So even if you don't care about the sort of Pilates business, hopefully it's just an insight into how people create a business
navigating
from the ground
space
up. I mean, with also minimal connections in the space.
Completely. We're green.
We're figuring it out as we go.
And sticky notes, which was like kind of you were drawn to that.
I was drawn to that.
But the idea is that honey, we're building something.
We're building it.
Having our little notes all over the place, and
we should have had post-it notes for this.
We should have had little post-it notes. Maybe we can add. We can always evolve. So you'll see the live process of us.
So the idea of like, if you were in a week, or like just in a week of us two, and like the messages we send each other, or the notes that we take down of things to do with the business,
what meetings we have, who are we talking to,
anything you would say, and sort of put on a sticky note, a post-it note. The idea is that that's what we would discuss here, and almost you get an insight into how we're maybe not making decisions, but how we've come to these decisions. I don't think we'll make live decisions necessarily on
we
the
don't want to.
podcast.
Yeah.
Also, actually, never say never.
But who knows? Maybe we can retroactively talk about it. And then we also hope to have this space be one where we can interview people in the classical world, people in the fitness world, you know, all kinds of, explore all kinds of topics, being like women from very different parts of the world in this space as teachers and
the fitness industry.
There's so much to unpack there.
So much to talk about.
It's very exciting. And I think that might be about it for the first one.
I would say so.
Thank you for being here.
Thanks for being here. Yeah, we hope to be quite regular, I think, with these podcasts.
Yes, I would like
where
that.
we can weekly.
Yeah, I think
not me just saying we're not going to make
decisions
I think on the podcast
weekly,
and then making it weekly.
Layla, this is why Layla's good, because weekly.
This is our dynamic.
Let's do
okay,
it.
So what?
I'm like, we'll film a podcast.
Yeah.
Layla's like, when, at what time?
Yeah. How, when,
how,
what, where.
when, who, what, when, where, why.
Okay, cool. We'll be aiming for weekly. Once we'll launch with this and then go weekly on whatever date we figure it out. Or what day in the week.
So welcome to our journey.
Yes. Welcome to our journey. I love that. Welcome to our journey.
Welcome to our journey.
And come along for the ride.
And see you soon.
Again. Bye.
And that's it.
Cool. 53 minutes. That went by quick.
Yeah, it did. Damn.
10 seconds.